also another request, Shane Hartley and Peter Rakes. Now, that was on behalf of the Mana Whenua from memory. Takes us to local board input. And we do have local board input from the Aotea Great Barrier Board, and with us now is Izzy. And then we will hear from the Franklin Local Board on the structure plans at item 8. So firstly, Izzy, and introduce colleague Richard. I know Richard by first name, but I think if I can allow you to introduce Richard and his expertise and role in the work in the Dark Sky Sanctuary as well. Izzy, with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Morena members. Thank you once again for this opportunity to come before you to chat with you about our International Dark Sky Sanctuary. We did manage to make your agenda deadline. I understand the documents were on there. I have brought with me this morning Richard Somerville-Ryan, who is our technical guru when it comes to this stuff on the island and has been heavily involved in the actual application and success of that application 2 years ago, and we have all met before. So I think with that, and without further ado from me, I'm going to hand over to Richard to make this morning's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzy, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity. This is a very short introduction of what has been, I think, one of Auckland's big successes in the area of conservation, but also in terms of creating something very special. The Great Barrier Dark Sky Sanctuary is the only sanctuary, dark sky sanctuary in the world that is part of a major urban zone, a major urban area. It is extremely significant. We've had thousands of internet hits on various sites and publicity over the last 2 years. We've created 4 new businesses on Great Barrier. We've had 3 festivals on dark sky, astronomy and other related issues on a small island of only 960 people. We've had multiple international interviewers coming to see people on the island, and we've had significant increase in international tourists visiting Great Barrier. We've had 2 large photo exhibitions. The latest one was done focused on Great Barrier as a night sky destination. That received 15 off-island competitors and 42 photographs at publishable level. So it's been a very great success, and we thank, obviously, the local board through Izzy's inspired chairmanship, but also the council for the original support when we made the application. Now, the application took so much work and seemed to be such a good piece of work that we published it as a coffee table book, which stands as my handout to you to read and familiarise yourself with why we think it's so special and why internationally it is recognised as being special. Now, just push this and see if it works. No? Aha. Right, okay. If you could quickly look at the map, there are a couple of things we need to bear in mind. That was the baseline. There's the light signature of Auckland, and that little red dot marker is Great Barrier Island. The centre of the light pollution dome is 85 kilometres from that little dot. What worries us is that if the sort of development that occurs could someone drop this down another way? Okay, right. This is a pattern, the satellite pattern of the actual light sources. Now, what worries us, there are 2 things that worry us in terms of the protection of Great Barrier as a sanctuary. The first is the internal rule structure and regulation. The second is organic growth of Auckland. And a very simple statement, since we only have 5 minutes, if the sort of growth occurs in the north, around Warkworth and Lee, as is now occurring in areas south Pukekohe and Pocono particularly, and that shows up very clearly on this map, then we can kiss the sanctuary goodbye. We're not allowed to have a dominant light dome in any area, and 45 kilometres will come in particularly within that light dome. Now, I failed abysmally on this. Can just give me the next one?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
So it's just that adult.
That one. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Light sources. Okay, so very quickly, the light pollution risks, principally in the Rodney area. We have serious issues in respect of New Zealand Transport Authority street lighting policies, particularly as their colour temperature is off to the blue end of the scale, not the more acceptable orange end of the scale. And the Great Barrier, the sanctuary, has no essential standing in any of the planning decisions and strategic decisions in areas that most affect the sanctuary status. Now, as a consequence of that, and this will be a reading test, but very simply, there's a number of things we need. Part of our commitment to going to the IDA, the International Dark Sky Association, was that within the 2 to 3 year timeframe, we would have regulatory structures in place to deal with lighting on Great Barrier. Because of the delays in getting the Hauraki Gulf District Plan incorporated within the unitary plan for RMA purposes, that has not yet occurred. Second, I'm not exactly sure of what we can do in respect of governance. The governance model we have at the moment has all of the governance relying upon the local board, but it seems to me that something that is an internationally recognised sanctuary needs a higher level of strategic protection via parks, via standing within other planning areas, but we need more than we've got at the moment. And the last one there is we need to be able to start a discussion with Auckland Transport and NZTA about street lighting and the control of street lighting within the developed areas. This is obviously way outside our current brief, but it is something that I think the Planning Committee needs to be aware of. I think I can almost stop at that point. Those are the issues. Thank you very much for the support that we had 2 years ago. It has been a resounding success. You've got something that is unique, and it sits with you as to what level of protection you want it to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So we'll just leave the requests on the screen there. So, Richard, I understand you've got a meeting coming up with our Director of Planning.
Yes.
And so there'll be a conversation about these requests. And in the motion today, we'll probably, we will, of course, express our gratitude for your joint attendance here today. And we will convey these requests to planning staff and Auckland Transport. I think that's the appropriate place.
Thank you.
We don't have detail on some of the specifics that you're highlighting here. We take you at your word, and we will refer those to the part of the council that can treat with that, and there'll be dialogue with you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Very, very soon. I think there's a great willingness here. So questions, members? Councillor Clow, please.
What distinguishes you from Mount John in particular?
We're darker.
You're darker?
Mount John is a reserve, and there are some technical requirements to be a reserve. The principal one being that Mount John is the site of a whole series of observatories. And it's an enormous area compared to the very small area of Great Barrier. Taking it put the technical aspects aside, sanctuaries are defined as being extremely isolated and fragile. And it's two of the defining points, and therefore worthy of protection. Mount John has a different standard. one of the requirements of a reserve is that they are required to give big, major outreach conferences. That is not a requirement for sanctuaries, but it's just worth noting we've managed 3 of them in the 2 years.
How do you blank out light on the island? I mean, Mount John totally blanks out everything. I mean, you go up on the bus and everything's blanked out, even on the bus and all that. So how do you try and get around that? Or
The major advantage we have on the Great Barrier is that there is no reticulated power. So we're virtuous in spite of ourselves. And neither do we have any street light. Those are the 2 major issues. Where I think we need protection is, in fact, new house builds. People are not aware that the lighting they have, even small levels of lighting, can have a major effect. It's not a big issue since we're all running generators at the moment, but seeing down the track with the change in technology, we do need some level of protection in planning rules and in building code rules.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you. And congratulations, Izzy and Richard, for all your hard work and your splendid achievement. Before I ask a question, I'd note that one of the other advantages Great Barrier has over Mount John is that it's a half an hour from Auckland International Airport, which is absolutely crucial. Just a technical question, really. The light pollution concern is a matter of colour, temperature, rather than frequency, or does it relate?
I have to stress I am not a technical expert in this, but the colour temperature one has been recognised as being one of the major issues in respect of light pollution and the creation of light domes. For your bedtime reading, there is the article. The major article is available in the handout set that I gave you there, and I'm not going to make claims that I don't have. The frequency is obviously an issue we're concerned with. The sheer amount of wattage, the amount of power, particularly going through new LED lights, is an issue we're worried about. The main thing we can do something about immediately is light colour. And 2 things in respect of, for example, streetlights in northern parts of Auckland, north of Orewa. If they were set at a standard of lower than 3,000 Kelvin, as opposed to the NZTA standard of 4,000, it would have a marked effect. Auckland Transport is doing wonderful things by essentially controlling through digital controlling the light levels after 11 o'clock, which people may not realise, but it's an extremely positive feature. But we probably need we need discussions with NZTA and with Auckland Transport about what levels we can take to protect, especially light colour, for protection of Great Barrier.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of support within the council for your proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker, please.
Sure. Commendations on your strategy, and my apologies if I haven't picked up on all of it. Quite obviously, we've got the dark sky strategy that you're implementing, and there are obvious ramifications for the rest of the Auckland region. I guess my concern is that the Great Barrier Local Board is in very much a leadership role in respect of this, and my question is around what sort of resourcing you might require to have more of a regional effect for what you're doing, because quite obviously you're leading it, you're advocating for it across the region, and that's phenomenal, but your local board resources are limited.
Probably is an Izzy answer, if there is one, Izzy.
Indeed, if there is one. Councillor Walker,
Richard, would you mind deactivating your mic while
is-
Izzy speaks?
it is expensive to monitor and make sure good governance is done. And at the moment, the local board sets aside, I think it's $20,000 out of our LDI budget for the dark sky governance. And with that, we have the Dark Sky Advisory Group, affectionately known as DAG, of which Richard chairs, and there's representatives from Mana Whenua and the community on that. But as we go forward, and it is growing in interest, as Richard said earlier, not only nationally but internationally, then we see ourselves having a few issues when it comes to budget. It may well be some think that when the board comes for a long-term plan or annual budget or whatever, that's where we start making a move or a push for that extra bit of funding to assist the Auckland, to assist us in helping and bringing attention to the Auckland region as well.
I just ask a supplementary question then. So my specific concern is that you're adequately resourced to template what you're doing so that it can be easily replicated across the region. If you're leading it and if you're templating it, and Richard probably understands what I mean, then it's very easy for other local boards to pick up on this initiative, not necessarily to the same degree. You're arguably fairly unique. And what do you require for that?
Richard, would you like to comment on that aspect?
I think there's some critical issues there, and it will require a wider community input than Great Barrier. But Warkworth is the site of astronometry observatories, and if we could there's no reason, and this will be a challenge, but there is no reason why Warkworth could not become the Tekapo of Auckland. It would require a major rethink, but if you look at the potential benefit to that, I think Tekapo has something like 300,000 tourists a year, going there largely because of the dark sky reserve and the availability of an observatory. So, on the Great Barrier, we can easily justify 20,000. So I think where we were making the application is that we need to be able to start the discussion with local boards, particularly, in my view, the local boards in your bailiwick, and it's for them to decide what they will do for their particular regions, but we want to be able to talk and present our case as to why we need them to protect their light so that we can preserve ours.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Councillor Sayers, you're interested in a large lake in your Rodney area? Look forward to that policy.
I do appreciate the presentation, obviously being made aware of the impact from the development happening around Warkworth. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and it's great that Councillor Sayers is here and he can discuss that with the local board and Councillor Walker. Of course, Whangaparoa is one of the closest points to Aotea with growth, and so making sure as the local councillor you take your actions there as well. That's all our jobs. And thank you. So what we'll do here is there have been some discussions. We'll make sure that this goes through to our Chief of Strategy. The Chief of Strategy will be in contact with Auckland Transport, and you are well aware of our LED rollout program. There's budget allocation to that. We probably might need to look at the output of that light, controlling that light. The light can be controlled by telemetry. It's very, very clever. I remember the Deputy Mayor explaining the science of all of this to me. And being an agriculturalist, of course. Okay, that's the last pun for the day. But it is a very, very clever LED light system, and maybe it's too much in the blue range at the moment. But we'll look at all of that. There's also, you're not alone in this, because I regularly get local queries about light spill in compromising the amenity of residential living, light spill to the coastal marine area, and upward light spill is what you're most concerned about. So we will definitely follow this up. And as Councillor Lee said, I think there's a real willingness around the table to get stuck in and sort this out.
very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr Chairman, for your time today, and also to all councillors for their support. On behalf of our local board, we'd like to thank you very much, and to the Independent Māori Statutory Board members as well. To those of you that are standing again, all the very best. To those of you that aren't, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Richard. I'll move that. Do I have a second? Deputy Mayor, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you. Now we'll go to public input from Andy Baker, Deputy Chair at Franklin Local Board, and he'll be speaking about item 8, the Drury Opaheki Pukakoi Pairata structure plans.